everyone, I'm Barbara Beck, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Welcome Home. Today we're going to be talking about integrating faith into the workplace. Well, what does that even mean? Well, if you're a Christian working in a secular environment, you probably know the challenges of how to live your faith without being intrusive, inappropriate, or even illegal in breaking workplace laws concerning sharing your faith, particularly if you work for the government. So to help us navigate some of these challenging situations, we have a wonderful guest here with us to discuss how to successfully integrate your faith into the workplace. The Bible's pretty clear about the importance of letting our light shine before men. Sounds a little like the workplace. Well, before we get to our distinguished guest, let's see what the current ladies have to say about integrating faith into the workplace and really every aspect of our lives. Welcome, ladies.
Hi.
Glad to have everybody here with us today.
Good to be here.
Now, I know everybody works on the panel. You all are all wonderful professional women, mothers, wives, workplace women. But Leanne, you kind of have a little different situation because your workplace is, I mean, a real traditional kind of workplace, right?
It's real work.
It's real work. I know it's all work with all of us, but I didn't quite know how to say that. But you have a place where you go every single day and you have people to manage, and it's a secular job, right?
Well, yes, but because my husband and I own it, so this is a little bit different.
Okay.
We can run it as a Christian workplace. But before that, I worked for public accounting in New York City, and then I worked in Orlando, and that was back when I was really on fire for the Lord. Not that I'm not now, but like learning about in my 20s about things that I wanted to share with people. And I remember feeling like, okay, they're going to think I'm really weird if I say these things or do these things or tell them I'm going to Bible study. But then it was interesting because I think I got stronger in my faith and I asked the Lord for strength. And then you would say just something little. You know how you can say just something like, that's such a blessing. And then it opens the door for somebody to be like, really? You think that's a blessing? And so I found ways before I owned my own workplace or my own business to figure out if other people kind of had the same faith. And a lot of times, even today in non-work environments, I'll find myself saying like, well, I'll just pray for you about that. And everybody that knows me, people that I'm friends with or acquaintances, they know that I have a relationship with the Lord. But it's funny how there's even times in some of my friendships who might not be as close to the Lord, you can kind of see their like tenseness, you know, sometimes when you say, I'll pray about that. And one time recently I got this comment back like, well, you pray about everything, don't you? And I was like, I do. And
that's
then
a good thing.
Yeah, but then it was just, you could tell that that was a little uncomfortable for them. So, but I said, but don't let that make you uncomfortable. That's just kind of how I'm wired or whatever. Yeah. So,
how do the rest of you feel about the importance of integrating faith into your everyday lives? It might not necessarily be the workplace. It might just be it might be at a grocery store or at your children's school. Are you doing it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think this topic, integrating faith into the workplace, for me, it's integrating faith in every aspect of my life. Okay. And really the way I feel about it is it's just a matter of authenticity. Like, how are we going to act towards other people? Are we going to be ourselves? Are we going to be kind? Or are we going to, shy away from loving on someone? And I think those are the ways, in my opinion, that people most respond or come to know that you love the Lord is when you treat them kindly. And they say, I mean, that's how I want to live my life. I want someone to look at me and say, gosh, what's different about her? Why does she do this differently? Or what does she care about that's different from the ways that other people act? That's how, and then that might prompt some conversation, and then that opens the door to have conversation about that. But really, I believe it's, are we living an authentic life and being who we're called to be?
I like that. I like that. Are we living authentically? Because one thing I think the world is so tired of is fake. Yeah. People they preach one thing and they live another. I mean, you see them at church, oh, hallelujah, then the next night you're seeing them out drunk as anything. I mean, it sends confusion, don't you think, to people like, who is this Jesus that you serve? So I think that hit me. The word that kept coming to me while we were doing this was people want to compartmentalize their faith. And I don't think you can do that. I think that you're either a believer and a follower of Christ, or you're not. And I think that comes off in every action. I mean, I love what you were just saying right there. It just like rings so in my heart. You know, how do we treat people? To me, what's the scripture? John 13:35, they will know we are Christians by our love. Right. And it's just, you know, how do we treat people? Are we gossipers? How do we do our work? I remember my daddy used to teach us, he says, when you go to your job, you know, don't be the one that's given, you know, if you're supposed to work a full 8-hour shift, don't be working 7 or 7.5 or get in a half hour late. You know what I'm saying? Be there, be the first one there, be the last one to go and give 150% because we're representing God Almighty and who He is. And so I think it's in our actions. I think that we've got to live out our faith. And my whole prayer every day is, God, let them want what I have because they like what they see. Because I tell people all the time, you may not believe in my Jesus. That's okay. I mean, I pray you do. But even if you don't believe in my Jesus yet, the morals and the values and the compass that you get from this holy word, it's worth the try. You know what I mean? So I want to live a life that they want to come try that.
My faith is just a big part of who I am. So the whole idea of living authentically, that's just what we do, I think, when we are people of faith, and we take it everywhere we go.
Well, not everybody does. Not everybody is like you, Deborah, because I was going to say, you probably have a hard time with this because your faith is, I mean, a big part of who you are. Everything you do and say shows Jesus, but we're not all that brave.
Well, I worked for the county for 13 and a half years.
You did.
And yeah, I really did,
So that's
Barbara.
the government. That's the government.
I did.
So,
I did.
So how did you handle that?
Well, let me just tell you, at the time that I was really young, and at the time that I was working for the government, much like you, I was probably really new in terms of my Christianity and really walking out my faith, if you will. And I can remember, you know, there would be situations going on in the office, and everybody would be responding a particular way, and I would be responding differently. And people would say, "What's wrong with you? You know, why are you acting like that? Why are you being so different?" And over time, I think people got to a point where they started to look to me for how to respond in certain situations versus them reacting first. But I would go to work. I would get to work early because my understanding is this is how I embrace the word. The Bible says, "Work as unto the Lord." Well, my interpretation of that for myself was I worked as though the person in my boss's office was God.
I love that. Yeah.
Which means whatever I wanted God to, however I wanted him to see me, that's how I wanted my boss to see me. So I was never the person that was going to be walking in the door at 8 o'clock. Why? Because we start work at 8 o'clock. So it was always my goal to get there 7:45. I would get in my office, I would get to my desk, I would get my coffee. Everybody would be standing around the coffee pot at 8:15, not at work. I would be at my desk. I'd already come in, I'd had my coffee, I'd read my devotional, and I was ready for my day. It got to a point where people would start coming to me and saying, you know, I'm dealing with this situation, what do you think?
Wow.
And it opened the door for me to be able to say, you know what, you just really need to pray. Do you believe in God? I'll never forget. And I really believe my faith kind of drove me out of my job, if you will. There was a few people in my department that were going through really difficult situations. And they would come to me and they would say, will you pray with me? Well, this one morning in particular, I decided to go up on the balcony at the Orange County Administration Building to pray with somebody. We went over in a corner and we started to pray, and somebody opened the door from the room that we were standing outside of. I didn't realize they were having a meeting, and it was like the commissioners. And they came out because we were standing outside this door praying. Well, before I knew it, everybody in the building, it was like, if you need somebody to pray, call Deborah.
So you didn't get in trouble for that?
Well, I didn't get in trouble for that one, but it just, but it started something in the building. And eventually it got to a point where I felt like people were just watching me to see if I was going to be doing my work or if I was going to be preaching to people and praying with people. And so I had to start shifting things and making sure that people weren't coming to me when they were on their break and I wasn't on mine.
Yeah.
You want to talk to me? Take a lunch at this time, and this is how we'll deal with it. But I realized that God was enlarging my territory. And so eventually I resigned from my job, but a lot of those people I still have relationships with. And what I didn't know was that at that particular time, God was using me to plant a seed that would ultimately be watered by somebody else, and these people would come to know Christ.
That's good. That's good.
You know, but I couldn't hide who I was. I couldn't respond the way everybody else was responding in certain situations.
Because that's who you are, Deborah.
Because that's who I am.
Yeah, a lot of other people, though, I think there'll be people listening today who are reticent to live that kind of a bold existence for Christ. But the Bible is so clear about letting your light shine before men. And that does mean integrating our faith. And the integration can be gradual. It doesn't have to be, here I am, I'm going to share the gospel with every person in my workplace. But it means living your faith like you're doing.
And it says, let your light shine. It doesn't say make your light shine. Which means in certain situations, I don't have to do anything but be.
Yeah.
This room could be pitch black, and you can light a candle, and that candle is going to light up the whole room. And so when we are in a situation, we become light in that dark situation. People should see you and say, wait a minute, something is different about you.
Yeah.
You know, and why is it different?
I like you just saying that because we moved into a new place, and it was funny, you know, I was sort of doing a refresher of my life, you know, and so I didn't really want to tell anybody what I did or anything like that. And so it was just getting to know people. And it was funny, the whole neighborhood started going around going, she's a Christian. She's a Christian. I never said a word.
Wow.
And I ended up talking, because now we've been there for a while, and they said, no, it's because you were just different. We watched you all. We watched your family. We watched how you all handled and you spoke to one another. People are watching us when we don't even know. And I wish Christians would grab that more, is that we are all in a big bubble. People, especially now, I think more than ever, because, you know, sometimes Christianity can take a bad rap. And, you know, for me, I think we just really need to be focused more than ever of just really living a life that, what you were just saying, that is pleasing to God, and that it is, I love that word, authentic. That is such a great word, that it's really alive in us, because then it's not something we have to put on or change a hat for. It's when you're squeezing orange, you shouldn't get lemon out of it. You should get orange juice.
We were at a hotel not too long ago at a wedding, and Kristen and her family were there, and I was not at that particular table having breakfast with them and their family, but I met up with somebody in the hot tub later on in the day who said to me, it was a lady, she said, oh, that's your daughter. She said, I saw her and her family praying at breakfast. And this lady was nowhere near being a Christian, nowhere near. The language, the hot tub stuff, it was not a nice thing. And yet she said, I really admired that. And what else did she say about it? Did you hear her?
Well, it was just kind of a sweet conversation. She said, I saw you guys pray. And I just love that. And she goes, I feel like I need to have my daughter in Sunday school. Like, I feel like we need to start going to church. And that gave us the opportunity to say, yeah, that'd be great. You know, these are some of the great
children
things.
Up in church and that kind of thing, and how important it is. And I mean, you just don't ever know. I think it's so important, Carolyn, what you said, to know that people do watch us. They know that we're different. They may not know why we're different. And that's where it gets hard. How much do we tell them? At what point? You know, sometimes I think you need to really earn the right to share with somebody before you go in the room and just, you know, blast it out. So it's
That's
just a
why
tough
I say
balance.
let your light shine and not make it shine. I think there's a difference between, because if you just be who you are, doing what you believe you're supposed to do, what happens is it draws people to you. And so then you don't have to go after people, and you don't have to be
knocking on doors.
Just be who you are.
Don't you think there's a fragrance when we're walking in the Spirit? I mean, there is I mean, I think the word talks about that. I don't have that scripture in front of me right now, but we are to be the fragrance of Christ. And, you know, it's so easy. I think Giselle was saying it on one of our other shows that we did before. You know, it's like if you go to a store and somebody says something that you don't like, you know, you want to flip and get this little attitude or whatever. And you really got to constantly be thinking, wait, that's about me. I didn't get what I want, but let me back up here. How would Christ want me to handle this so I'm a good? I mean, I don't know about you, but I have to think about it all the time. Like with my children, with my husband. I mean, you have to be on purpose.
You have to think about it all the time because I don't care where you go, Barbara Beck. People know who you are, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just pop off at the cashier.
So I can't do that anymore. Or even driving in traffic. You know, that's where we need to let our light shine. Or I'm talking to myself here because it is kind of hard when somebody cuts you off in traffic, and you do have to think, what if we all thought, ooh, I better not do that because they might know that I'm a Christian. I mean, that helps me to be on this show and to think, yeah, I do. Our standards need to be way up here as Christians. We have a responsibility to live like Jesus would live and to look like Jesus and to act like him.
But you know who I feel for, and I would love to hear everybody talk about this a little bit, is for those people who are working in a secular setting every day, who are wanting their light, that they get sort of put on them, oh, there's that Jesus girl. And then they're sort of, you know, you can be isolated. And I think for some of them out there today, you know, I just feel like we need to encourage them that if they are in their isolation, you know, what are some things that they can do? Because you can't quit your job usually, you know, you can't just quit, you got to stay there. But how do you do it to keep loving people who maybe aren't so loving back? I think that's when you're really putting it.
The parallel is those of us who have grandchildren or children in public school where it's really not, it's frowned upon to share your faith and to be a Christian and to sit there and have your little prayer before you eat your lunch at school. And so, you know, what does it mean for the person who is frustrated in an environment that is secular? I don't know exactly how to handle that. I can
honestly say this, we make a distinction between secular jobs and Christian jobs and secular school and Christian school. But Barbara, in all honesty, even in Christian environments, we're not all created equal, if you will. We're not all at the same place in our faith, and we don't all respond the same way. My kids have been in Christian school forever, and they've had some really strange experiences in Christian schools as believers. And so I've had times when I've had to say to them, you know what, just don't let that get to you. You just continue to be who you are and honor the God that you serve. You're not responsible for somebody else and how they act or what they do. All you can be responsible for is you. We've been in situations, even in athletic events. The other school is a Christian school, but they don't have good sportsmanship. And you see it flowing from the top down. And so I know we think that there's something special about Christian school.
We would like to think that, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'll say, I think some of the most special blessings that we have ever had have been some of the things that I've noticed in my kids' public school. I feel so honored that they can be at the school that they go to. And, you know, I don't know that my children are praying at their meals because I think that requires a lot of discipline on their part at school. But I certainly think that if they did choose to do it, I don't believe the administration would frown upon it. I think, you know, it's quiet. They wouldn't be standing up. You know, I think in public school, there's a lot of freedom. I know we have a Moms in Prayer group at our public school, and there are opportunities that my kids can have to be part of different ministries or different groups in public school. But ultimately, I don't believe it's the school's job to teach them values. You know, that comes from their home life. That comes from what we teach them. They learn values in our own home. I want them to understand character. I want them to understand what's important and how to treat other people. But at the end of the day, for my kids, you know, we talked about this before, but what we say to them when they get out of the car is kings are kind, kings have courage, and kings love Jesus. You know, that is what we do. And because we do that's how we act. We act kind towards people. So I'm very grateful for the schools that my children have attended and feel like there's just been so many opportunities for them to learn so much because of the differences in their peers.
Yeah, and you know, something that just hit me, Leanne, I know you need to say something too, but is that 1 Corinthians 10:31, it says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. And I think that's the biggest thing we want to teach our children, or for us as Christians, is you might be persecuted a little bit for what you believe, but all the more be bold. Don't be ashamed. Be yourself. Don't be condemning. Don't be judging of other people, but let your light shine for Christ, but don't try to conform to the ways of the world, right? That's the biggest thing I think we want for our kids. Don't try to conform to fit in, because people would just know you're being fake. Stay true to who you are, and then I think people will see it.
I was just going to say, Barbara, you had said, what about those that are out there and are working in a place where maybe it does feel a little strange? The best thing you can do, and I remember being in New York City, which was not necessarily, a mecca for, Southern Christians. But I remember praying, just, Lord, give me somebody, a friend, that I can have some kind of like-mindedness. And so I just would encourage y'all that are out there that need that to find somebody that you can talk about these sort of things. I mean, look, lots of people found you in the county or whatever. So, so God's got somebody for each of us, to encourage you.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
On one of our previous shows, we were talking about purpose. This is one of those examples where you are in this particular place, or you are called to this location. And if you can keep in mind as a believer that I am here for a purpose, you don't know what that purpose is. There may be one person in that entire place that God has allowed you to be there so that that person can see an example of what real godliness looks like. They might be a baby Christian. They may be somebody that's contemplating giving their life to the Lord. And when they meet you, they start to see what this is really supposed to look like. And so purpose, again, follows us everywhere. And so how we operate in our workplace, in our schools, in our homes, everywhere, really has to do with being able to win people to Christ.
Let's have a closing verse. Anybody have a really good one?
I do.
All right.
Titus 2:7-8 says, "In everything set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching show integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about us."
Ooh, that's good. What version was that? I love that. Do you remember?
I do not know.
That's good. Like a
But
paraphrase.
Titus 2:7-8.
I love that. Well, thank you, ladies, for all of your great insights and comments. And viewers, we do want to encourage you today. If you're in a job where you're not happy, remember who your boss is. Your boss is Jesus. Whatever you do your work heartily as for the Lord, not for man. That woman, that man, they're not your boss. The Lord is. And if we can get that perspective, it'll help us to enjoy the jobs that we're doing, to fulfill our purpose in life, and to be able to integrate authentic faith in the workplace or wherever it is that you have influence in life. So thanks for joining us for this part of our program. We have more coming up, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
But no doubt, it goes beyond our job, the way we reflect God in our work. It's part of our parenting. It's part of the way in which we relate to one another. All of these things, doing laundry, right? Doing the dishes, changing diapers.
Right.
All of these realities, they're part of what it means to serve our neighbor and to glorify God.
Hi viewers, I'm so glad that you're here with us today. We have a really super interesting conversation that we've been having with the current ladies, and now we're going to be having it with Damian Sheeter. Damian is the senior pastor at New City Church in Orlando, and he is almost Dr. Damian Sheeter. So I'd like to introduce you to my good friend. Hey Damian, how are you today?
I'm doing well. It's good to be here.
In August, you're going to be a doctor, right? Or you're going to
That's
at
the
least
plan.
defend it. Yeah.
That's the plan.
If they accept you, which
That's
I'm
right.
sure they will. Before we get into our discussion on integrating faith into the workplace, Damian, let's talk for a few minutes about your family, because I want to know all about your wife and your kids. How long have you been married?
Yeah, great. Well, I love to talk about that.
Good.
I've been married to Leah for 12 years this fall. So her name's Leah. She's beautiful. She's a a wonderful mother and wife, and we have 3 daughters.
Good.
So our oldest daughter is Olivia. We call her Livy,
Uh-huh.
and she's almost 8.
Okay.
And then Scarlett, our middle daughter, is 5. And then Adeline is the newest addition. She's 20 months.
That is great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I love little girls. It's just so
Yes.
much fun. I only had 2 daughters, so I have no sons. I have grandsons, but I loved bringing up daughters, which will make your world kind of rock in the days to come.
I bet so.
Start saving up now for weddings. You've got
Yes.
3 weddings, right?
Yes.
Yes, one
That's
of these
right.
days.
That's right. It has begun.
Okay, so you are the pastor at New City, and the reason I found out, I think our viewers might find this interesting. My daughter, Kelsey, and her husband, Kyle, go to New City, and they said, we'd love to have you come. And here, Damien, he's really a cool pastor, and love the church, love the youth, love the young kind of demographic of the church. So we did go, and I was super impressed with your preaching style. I love the fact that you're very laid back and kind of intellectual in a lot of ways, Damien. Has anybody ever told you that?
Sometimes.
Yeah?
Yeah. I've heard it before.
So it's good. Your preaching is good. Tell us why we should go to New City. Maybe there'll be some viewers out there today listening and wanting to kind of explore a new church. What's so great about New City?
Well, I love New City. On Sunday morning particularly, I think when people come, they experience a hospitable church. A church is very welcoming.
Right.
We have lots of young families. At the same time, there is a growing number of maybe we could call empty nesters, or people who have kids who are now having kids, and they are growing, which is a fun thing for me.
Growing from 0 to 3 couples.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's a positive trajectory, right?
It is amazing, Damien. One of the first things I noticed when I went there, it was like all these young families with children, and a lot of the children and babies are in the service as well.
There's just enough tradition at New City.
I love that.
Yeah, we really value that. I think there's just enough where people who may be up and in, or people who may be more familiar with the church, are attracted to that. Yet at the same time, I think that we try to be very thoughtful and intentional about explaining certain parts of the service, why we do certain things, and keeping Jesus, the gospel, at the center.
Right.
And so I think those things are things we all need to hear.
How do you get people at New City, Damien, to drop their guard and to be real and to recognize that there are problems in our lives?
Yeah. Well, I think we try to do that in a number of ways. We really emphasize community at New City. So community groups are a core part of our church. So maybe you'll hear me say on Sunday mornings that New City is not a church with community groups, but we're a church of community groups.
I love that.
And so I think language creates culture, and I hope it's true, and I think it is true about New City. When you get people together consistently to connect with one another and to care for one another, over time it becomes harder and harder to keep that facade up, that everything's okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's one way. I think another way on Sunday mornings is, as a preacher, I try to think of sharing illustrations from my own life where I don't have it all together. And at the same time, not make it only about me, but try to really reflect and think about conversations I'm having throughout the week with people where I can bring those to bear safely, not revealing anyone, but trying to apply the text and Jesus to all sorts of situations. And I hope that that's some of the ways we're accounting for what you're talking about, because it's a real thing.
It is, absolutely. One of the passions that you have, Damien, you were telling me, when I invited you to come on, I wanted us to just have a real natural kind of conversation and to learn more about you and, of course, about New City and your family. But I wanted to know your heart. And you told me that what you're working on with your dissertation, and also what your heart is to have people integrate faith into the workplace. And I know that's a challenge for a lot of people, because personally, I've been in the workplace that is not a Christian place. This is a Christian place. I have a Christian job. I'm in ministry here. But I also recognize that when I was in the secular world, I was still in ministry, teaching school, or whatever the job is that we have to do. I think it's so important for us to bring our faith into the workplace. That's your passion.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think that underneath that is a passion to see people grow as whole persons in Christ. And we spend a lot of time at work. We spend a lot of time at work. And so I found that in one way, I think it could be the most natural place for us to live the expression of our faith. But in other ways, for various reasons, it can be one of the most challenging places.
Right. Sometimes people are afraid to share their faith in the workplace, or they feel like it's not appropriate to do that. Damien, I was a school teacher for 13 years, and I understood from doing a little bit of study and research that even though I could get fired for proselytizing, presenting the gospel to a child, I also had a right to express if somebody asked me, if a child asked me. I can remember one little girl came up to me one day and she said, "Why are you always smiling? You're always so happy," which wasn't true, but she perceived it that way.
Yeah.
And I whispered in her ear and I said, "It's because I love Jesus." And her face just lit up because she was a Christian as well and she understood that. But there are a lot of times, Damien, where we do have the freedom to express our faith in the workplace. So what do you do to that person out there today who is fearful of that, afraid to be reprimanded or maybe even lose a job in a secular workplace?
Yeah. Well, it's always a challenge, I think, and varying fields have different things to consider, whether you're in medicine or in education or in business. But I think one of the things that I've discovered, both in my research and just in 10, almost 11 years of ordained pastoral ministry, is as I talk to people, sharing your faith at work can become a project. And when it becomes a project, it can become a burden. But trying to live wholly who you are in front of everyone, everywhere, just like you did with that little girl, I think that is the first step in feeling like evangelism is more like sharing what God is doing in my life, as opposed to trying to convince people, because that's why I think I'm here.
So tell me specifically what you mean when you're talking about a holistic approach. I hear what you're saying. I want to be sure that we have an understanding of what is the holistic approach.
Yeah. So Jesus is Lord is really the Christian worldview. And so if Jesus is Lord of my life, then that means there isn't a square centimeter of me inside of me or around me that Jesus doesn't care about, that Jesus isn't interested in. And so once I understand increasingly, which is a lifelong journey, that that's true, then all of a sudden I start first reflecting, what does the finished work of Jesus on the cross for me, what does that have to say about my work? What does that have to say about my frustration? And so, for example, I've heard many stories of people being frustrated at work. Everyone else is frustrated for similar reasons. And they may all be talking about it around the water cooler, the proverbial water cooler.
Right.
And the Christian then, that person, they have a few options. I think we tend to think, many of us, okay, what's the right thing to do? But as I've listened to people who have lived their faith holistically in all of their life for so long, they help me reframe the other options we have to think about in that moment. For example, they'll say something like, you know, I have a choice in that moment, Damien. I can say to myself, do the right thing, don't tear the person down. Or I can be really open and say, these circumstances are really hard. I dread coming to work because of this person or this management style, just like you. But one of the things that my faith helps me understand is that I think God is doing something in my character, even in the midst of these circumstances. And then share something simply. You don't have to go on forever. I think sometimes we feel like we do. But I think those small opportunities of giving people a glimpse that you struggle, but at the same time that you understand that God is doing something in the midst of this, in your character, I think that's an example of ways where that wasn't a gospel presentation.
Right, right.
It wasn't, but it could be, and it certainly is you living the Jesus as Lord worldview in front of people.
I love that. Yeah, you know, when we talk about this, integrating faith into the workplace, we naturally, the first thing that I think of is, well, I need to share the 4 spiritual laws. I need to tell somebody how to have Jesus come into their heart. And that's not what you're saying at all.
That's right.
You're talking about living our faith, having a right attitude. In fact, sometimes it might be saying nothing. And
That's right.
allowing Jesus to grow our character.
Yes, that's right. That's right. David Miller is a historian at Princeton, and he has studied for years the faith at work movement, mostly with Christian people, but not all. But David Miller himself would identify as a Christian. But he has this approach where he talks about most people, when they think of faith at work, have been taught to put their faith in a certain box. And so he has 4 E's, and I won't try to recall all of them right now. But when the people that I work with and have ministered to, the 2 E's that they in their discipleship tend to think is faith and work is of the evangelism box or the ethics box. And those are true, but they're almost like permission to play values, right? If you're a Christian, if Jesus is Lord, to be a Christian in your life, like those are things that happen naturally as the Spirit's at work in you. But there's also this reality where you can be enriched by what you do, and that you can be a conduit of Christ's life by being excellent, by enjoying what you do, by pursuing growth and serving others in your work and with your work.
What happens, Damien, when you don't enjoy what you do? Because there'll be people out there watching today that are saying, I'm stuck in what I consider to be a dead-end job. This is not me talking, because I love my job. But they'll be saying, I don't even feel like this is where God wants me to be. But because of circumstances, they're kind of stuck in that job, maybe for years to come. How do you respond to that person?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would say that's a real thing, and that can be really challenging. And I in no way would ever want to marginalize that or not empathize with that. I certainly can recall jobs that I've had like that. So I would want to start there. And I would want to speak to the realness of that. I also would want to try to speak encouragement that there is value in the work itself. God has created us as workers. And so because of that, what you're doing in serving your neighbor, even if it's a janitor, I worked for 2 years as a janitor personally when I was in seminary. And I had this interesting contrast, right, between studying these lofty, amazing truths in God's Word and theology, and then every day sweeping and vacuuming and emptying smelly trash and all of these things. And so what I realized is I had a bad attitude towards that personally. I knew I didn't want to be doing this the rest of my life. So what did it matter now? But I realized what was happening is that God was teaching me personally the value of work itself. The value is a service. What if no one would have picked that trash up? Right? What if the garbage workers who work hard in Orlando just decided they weren't going to do that anymore? So it truly is a service to your neighbor. So I think that I would hope to encourage people that God cares about your frustration, and yet at the same time, God is using you to do something crucially important.
And that may be what He's called you to do.
That's right.
For a season, or maybe forever. That might be a career that somebody would have forever, that we do need to honor that. What does the Bible have to say about the workplace?
Well, I think where I would start is, it's always a good place to start at the beginning. So if you think about Genesis 1, we see that work existed before sin ever entered the world. So, in fact, one thing I will mention in sermons or to my congregation or anytime I get to talk about faith and work is I'll say, who was the first worker? And the answer, a lot of times we can think Adam and Eve. And that's a good answer, but actually God was the first worker.
In creating.
That's right.
I know, as you said that, I was going to say, of course, Adam. And then I should have said Adam and Eve, and then, no, I should have said God.
And so God is the first worker. And so work is a wonderful thing. And then He creates Adam and Eve in His own image. And to be created in God's image, lots of ink has been spilled about what does that mean. But I think basically we can say that human beings created in God's image get to relate to God in a unique way. They get to reflect God to one another and to the world in a unique way. And they get to reign with God as co-creators. And we don't get to create in any way God gets to. We almost get to refashion what God has created. And yet before sin, we see God working first, and then Adam and Eve. And where did He tell them to work? They were gardeners, which is amazing, to till the soil, but then also to take His image all over the world through their work. And so theologians will call this the creation mandate, that Adam and Eve were given this mandate to take their image, which was like a mirror. Imagine like a mirror. If I reflect a mirror right now, you would see you. But if I angled it, I would be reflecting you to the world. And so in that sense, image bearers in our work, we're to reflect God to one another because He's the worker. So I think I would start there by saying work has a central place in what it means to be human. But of course, not more than our jobs. we in America, especially in the West, we love to think about our jobs. And there are some good reasons for that, and there are some less noble reasons why we think about that. We tend to value certain occupations for what they pay or the status they offer us instead of the good work we get to do. So it can get messed up, but no doubt it goes beyond our job, the way we reflect God in our work. It's part of our parenting. It's part of the way in which we relate to one another. All of these things, doing laundry, right? Doing the dishes, changing diapers, all of these realities, they're part of what it means to serve our neighbor and to glorify God.
So if we could get that mindset, Damien, that whatever we do, of course that comes from Colossians someplace, don't remember the numbers, whatever you do your work heartily for the Lord rather than for man, knowing that from the Lord, you are going to receive the reward for the work that we do. So I think it's real important for us to think about whatever the workplace is, whether it's secular or ministerial, that we are working for the Lord.
Yes.
And if we could get that mindset, how much greater would we be? How much more effective would our work be?
Yeah.
Right?
I think so. I think that's exactly right. There's an author named Os Guinness, and he wrote this wonderful book called The Call. And he has this idea that he calls the audience of one. And so his question is, what if in our work we first thought of the audience of one person, and that's the triune God? And if we had that, what would that do? How would that shape the way we thought about our service? You know, in my research, one of the overarching themes has been when I begin, and by the way, even pastors struggle with what I'm about to say. Maybe we could say especially pastors, even though somehow our work seems more spiritual. If we can understand that sin causes us often to work for our identity, as opposed to as an expression from who we are in Christ. So you could say we're working for our identity, which is not the right way, instead of from our identity in Christ. Once we get those messed up, a lot of things can go haywire.
Right, because if we really are image bearers, that's where that's coming from. That's our identity. So oftentimes when a man or a woman loses a job, particularly one in which their status was pretty high up there and then the job is gone, they get fired or laid off or whatever it is, because they place their identity in their work, they're in a heap of trouble.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
How do we avoid that?
Yeah, I think that it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
I think walking with God daily, having people in your life, community that truly know you and that you truly know them. I think these are the basic spiritual rhythms of the Christian life. I think have to be the steady diet in order to prevent us from finding our identity in anything except Christ. But we do spend so much time at work.
Right.
And work is elevated for lots of reasons in our culture. But I think that reflective questions of, am I choosing this job because of the status that it will give me? Or am I choosing this job or pursuing this career path because God has designed me in such a way that this is one of the primary ways, given who I am, how I can serve God and my neighbor. I think when we start to reframe those types of questions, then we can protect ourselves from finding our identity in our job.
Because you're kind of making reference to our calling in life. Sometimes our calling is not, and you can correct me, please, if I'm wrong, but our calling is not just God putting in our mind, okay, you need to host a television show. No, the calling was that God gave us certain skill sets that would allow us to maybe excel in certain areas. Didn't have to be in front of a camera. It could have been teaching. For 13 years of my life, it was teaching because I enjoyed that. So I think we need to be real careful about answering the call and not thinking it has to be one particular job. Would you agree with that?
I think that's a great way to put it. I think that we all have the same primary calling, which is to follow Jesus.
Right.
And then many theologians have said we have various secondary callings. And so for me, I know I'm called to be a husband. Why?
Right.
Because I'm married.
Right.
I know I'm called to be a father. I know I'm called to be a neighbor. I know I'm called to lots of things. But I think what you're saying is right. Like for me personally, if you said, Damien, what's your calling? My answer would not be to
Preaching,
be a pastor
right.
or preaching? The way I would answer it is I think, given reflection and prayer and community, other people telling me, I think that my calling is to inform and facilitate whole person growth in Christians. Now, I do that as a pastor right now.
Right, but you could be doing that in a myriad of other ways.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Right. And I think that's something that to me is freedom for people who feel like they are maybe in the wrong job. You might be in the wrong job, but your skill sets are still going to be, that's where your calling is going to be coming from. Let me ask you one more question, because we're almost out of time. I hate this. I'm thinking about you as a preacher, seeing this wonderful congregation of mostly young people that are there, that I just think it's such a rich group of people. Rich meaning wonderful, not monetarily rich. But do you think with your people, and maybe this is true of any church, let's kind of generalize it.
Yeah.
Is there a gap from Sunday morning to when they go to the workplace as far as the way they are living their lives? And do we all have a tendency to put on that fresh face on Sunday morning and then go to the workplace and be somebody else?
Yeah, I think there's a huge gap. I think even for someone like me as a pastor who is connected to this gap and in fighting, praying, trying to figure out how do we bring these two worlds together, I think even then there's a real gap.
Yeah.
I think that it doesn't have to be complex or complicated in order for us to try to bring these two things together. I think as a preacher or as preachers, I think trying to make applications, even simple applications to the workplace is important. One thing that I'm trying to increase is, it's known pastors do hospital visits, but what about workplace visits? What about visiting people in their workplace where you get to see what it's like to be them? So as I have done more of those, I also can understand, okay, what are these people facing Sunday to Monday?
Right,
and I think
that's great.
I think the last thing that I would say about that is increasingly as not just pastors, but as church leaders, I think we can tend to think the role of the church is primarily to equip people to serve in the church. But that's actually not true.
Right, so much more.
The real ministry is in the world.
Right.
And so I think the church is what we really need to increasingly do as community group leaders, as pastors, as any type of leader, even if you don't have a title, even if you're just a person showing up on Sunday loving other people. I think we need to increasingly find simple and maybe innovative ways of equipping people for the rest of their lives, equipping people for the workplace, so that people would realize we don't come to church to get to spend some of our free time on mission with God, but actually we come to church to be equipped to be on mission with God in our whole life.
Because there are 6 days out there where we need to be in ministry.
That's right.
In addition to being equipped on Sunday morning. Damian Sheeter from New City, senior pastor there at New City Church in Orlando. Thank you so much for being here with us today and all of your insights and challenges, viewers, for us to live a more godly life in the workplace, to integrate our faith into where we go to work every single day, and to not have our identity wrapped up in our jobs, but rather in Christ as image bearers of the King. We've got more coming up, so stay with us. What's cooking? Hey everybody, I'm here with John Rivers from the Four Rivers Smokehouse and the Coop, and we're so happy to have you here with us today.
Barbara. Thank you so much.
And all in your beautiful color, and you brought colorful food.
I am. It is fiesta time.
Yes, it is. It's always fiesta time.
Somewhere.
Is it not? Somewhere. It's fiesta time. What are we going to be doing today, John?
We're going to go Mexican theme for a little while.
Okay, I love it.
And we're going to start with the very basics, which are your salsas and your pico de gallo.
Yes.
Okay. And people think sometimes that Mexican is so complicated and complex. You know, it's really not. It's simple. It's about using basic, great ingredients and pulling them all together.
Okay.
And I'm still convinced that Mexican restaurants really only have like 10 or 12 ingredients and just keep mixing them different ways, and they call them different dishes.
And we don't know any different, so
no,
we're happy with it.
So,
but it is healthy too. Some of this is healthy,
absolutely.
right?
Until you fry it, yes.
Yeah, right. Well, we're not doing any frying or cooking today, really.
We're not. We're not. Right now, we're going to just do salsa. So we're going to do two. Okay. We're going to do a pico de gallo, which in simple terms is tomatoes and onions.
Okay.
Okay. And this is a topping that would go on a traditional dish. And really, what's nice about it is the simplicity of it. If you take a look, it's tomatoes, jalapenos, onions, lime, cilantro, and salt.
Okay.
And that's it.
Right.
And this is actually the entire ingredient list right here.
And a whole lot of chopping going on.
And a whole lot of chopping going on. That's where the majority of the time comes in with this.
But you have a chopper.
Right? That's for our salsa.
Okay, so you don't use that.
Not for this.
For this,
No, this is
okay.
old
By
elbow
hand.
grease. Yep, you got to go
Okay.
into it. Now we're also going to make a salsa, and the difference you can see between a pico de gallo and a salsa, this is much refiner.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And this one in particular we're going to do today consists of tomatillas. Okay, and serrano.
Okay.
All right, this has some onions and garlic in it and cilantro, but you can see how simple this is. that you
Except
put-
for when you tell me serrano and tomatillo, because before we came on the air today, I know now because we talked ahead of time, but I didn't know what a tomatillo was, nor did I know that a serrano was a pepper.
Well, you know,
Right?
don't worry, you are not alone.
Okay,
a lot
good.
of people don't know what it is,
And they
unless you're
certainly
cooking
look like a
Mexican.
green tomato. When I saw it, oh, we're doing green tomatoes today,
Yes.
fried green tomatoes. No, this is not a tomato. What is it?
That is a great thing. It is actually not of the tomato family.
Okay.
Both of these, the serrano pepper and the tomatillo, are indigenous to Mexico.
Okay.
So they come from that area. So don't feel bad about not knowing about it. You know, traditionally didn't grow up with pecan pie.
but I
and
was born in
tomatillos.
Texas, so I should know. I mean, I was a little bit close to Mexico, as you were.
Yes,
Right?
yes, but I did not know either. So
Yeah.
we're in the same
Okay.
boat together.
All right, I'm fine with that.
So a tomatillo, you can pick these up at the regular grocery store.
Okay.
Okay. It looks like a tomato. It feels like a tomato, but it's not. It comes in a husk.
Uh-huh.
Okay, which makes it a little bit indiscernible. You take it and you want to take that husk off, and it's sticky.
Yes.
Okay. So you let it soak in a little bit of warm water.
Okay.
And for about 20 minutes, and then it peels just off, and it's nice and clean for you.
It peels off.
Yes. Mhm.
But the husk peels off.
The husk will
But
peel
you're
off.
going to cook these
We're going to cook it just like
with
this.
with the peel on.
We sure are.
Okay.
Okay. And to cook them, there's two ways to do it. You can either boil them, okay, or you can roast them. We're going to roast it today. So like when you go to a restaurant, you see a roasted salsa. We're going to show what that means.
Okay, good. Good.
Now we're going to use a serrano pepper. Okay. And a serrano pepper, as you can see, is a little different from a jalapeno. Looks same color and everything, but much smaller. And I'll tell you what, this little fellow can pack a little bit more heat.
Okay.
It's not crazy, okay, but it's 5 times hotter than the jalapeno.
See, a jalapeno to me is about 5 times hotter than I can.
Then
I'm in
okay.
trouble with a serrano. When I start tasting the serrano, I want some water close by.
Okay.
Maybe a fire hydrant.
Well, hopefully everything will blend, so it won't be quite so hot.
Okay.
You can control the heat level of your salsa based on how many peppers you put in it.
That's true.
That's
Okay.
one way. The
Okay.
second way, what drives the heat in a pepper is 2 things. It's the seeds that are inside,
Yes.
okay, and also the veins that come inside
The
of
veins
it.
are hot.
The veins and the seeds, because
Okay.
they're producing the actual seeds.
Okay.
So if you want to tone down a pepper, but you still want that flavor,
Right.
you just cut out the seeds and cut out the veins.
Very
This one's a little small, and you have to have a really small knife to do that. But so we're going to go with this.
But you're
okay?
not taking the seeds or the veins out of these.
We're not going to take
So,
the seeds out of the veins
again,
out of this.
Water.
All right, so let's get this roasting, and while this is roasting, we'll go over here and start chopping.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So to roast peppers, roast anything, you put your oven on high roast, okay, and it only takes like about 5 minutes. You're looking,
Oh,
you're looking for
good.
that nice black brown to get on the top of it, and in between you might have to flip them just a little bit.
Okay.
Okay? I take a little bit of oil, okay, and just roll them around in it. Cover it
Okay.
up just a little bit.
olive oil.
Yep.
You use olive oil for everything. Pretty much.
You know
That's
what?
your oil
It's
of
so
choice.
funny. You know, Monica, being a vegan at home, has really started getting me into avocado oil.
I didn't know there was
which
such a
I
thing.
like avocado oil when you're dealing with Mexican. I've been cooking with it more.
Really?
It complements the flavor more so than olive does.
Okay.
Yeah, because the oil is going to taste like the fruit that it came from.
Now, where would you get avocado oil?
Whole Foods.
Okay,
yeah,
not
I don't know.
at your normal
I'm not
grocery
sure
store.
if she's found it at
Okay.
you know a Publix yet.
I've never even heard of it, but it might be healthier than olive oil, or a little less fat.
Less fat for
Okay.
sure, but
Okay.
you know the flavor again. Once the flavor profile again, because you typically
Okay.
put avocado on top of Mexican.
Yes.
So I take a little bit of salt once I've rolled this around, and just put it on top.
You always use coarse salt. You like that?
I do.
right?
I do. I
Coarse sea
like
salt.
Yes, I
Okay.
like the distribution of the flavor in it. All right, and we're going to take this now and just throw it in the oven.
Okay.
Okay. And like I said, it only takes a few minutes.
Should we pull out through the
Sure.
magic of television
Yeah,
what
oh,
you've
look
already
at you.
roasted? All right, go ahead and put those
Pretend
in,
like
and
you
we'll
don't see
show
this
everybody. Look how fast that was.
Oh,
He
look,
said it
another
was fast. And so this is what they look like
Is this what
after
it comes
they
out
roast.
of?
5
Yep.
minutes,
Okay,
right?
super simple, super
Okay.
easy. Now, all I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put it in a food processor.
Okay.
Okay.
So you don't have to take off the skin.
Of the
Of the
tomatillos.
tomatillo.
We've already dehusked them.
No. I mean
This is all the great part of it.
Yes, that is
And
great.
We'll put in a pepper.
I actually peel my tomatoes before I eat them. Yes.
Wow.
I don't care for. I know.
That
I
is
know.
intensive.
I know.
Okay, so I put all this in here. I'm going to put one pepper.
All right.
For you.
Thank you.
Okay. And I like to go ahead and put my cilantro in. Okay, I've already put my salt in the beginning.
Right.
Okay.
Which, by the way, viewers, we will have this recipe up on our website, and I believe we've even posted it on Facebook. Don't take that to heart, but I know that our viewers always love to have these recipes, and you are so gracious to share these with us as well.
I make up different ones for the viewers, but yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm joking. All right, so we're going to put it on a pulse because we want this to be really fine.
Okay.
And that is it.
Wow.
Isn't that nice?
And that's my pico de gallo.
This is close to pico de gallo. That's over. That's a friend
my
over there.
Serrano and Tomatillo.
Yes, I'll let you get that open.
Oh, really? Okay. Like I'm the.
Actually, this
there
is
we go.
Here we go.
Oh.
Okay.
I just broke it. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. So here's what it tastes like.
Okay. Oh, am I tasting?
Want me to taste it first to see
Sure,
the
you taste
heat
it
level?
first. You taste it first. I think we have some professional tasters too today. Hot or no hot? Look, nice.
Take a little bite. I got a little baby.
That was not double dipping because I hadn't tried it yet. It's a little hot. All right. I do have some water in the refrigerator if I need it.
Very little bite. Eat more of the chip because the chip will, help. Yeah, isn't that nice? All right.
That's good.
So
That's good, but it
fresh.
is hot.
Fresh. All right. So to make the pico de gallo, it's so simple. You take all these ingredients and you chop them fine. Now, I'm a big fan of it has to be small. Okay,
Yes.
I don't like big pieces in there. And the tomatoes, I'll even core out
I saw you doing that. It's amazing.
the seeds and stuff,
He
and
doesn't
it
like
keeps
seeds
it
in his
so much cleaner.
salsa.
Now, why don't you taste this?
I still have a little piece of this,
okay.
so it's not double dipping exactly.
Okay.
But this will be a little milder, right?
Oh yes, this is fresh. There's minimal heat in there, a little bit of jalapeno, but you can taste that. The cilantro really lifts it up, and the lime. So 2 basic core ingredients for cooking with Mexican. We'll start here and we'll keep building up.
Salsa de Serrano y Tomatillo. This will be on our website for you. What's this called again? Pico de gallo? It's gone to my brain. The hot. No, this is not so hot. This is wonderful. Thank you for being here with us today. We want fresh. We want you to have lots of parties with your families, lots of wonderful time around the kitchen table, laughing, enjoying each other, and talking about Jesus. We'll be right back with more. I hope you enjoyed our program today. We've been talking about how important it is to live our faith everywhere, every second of every day. We don't want to be accused of being Sunday morning Christians, where we go to church and then we forget about sharing the love of Christ other times throughout the week. Listen to Jesus' words in Matthew 10:33 when he says, "But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven." Yikes! I can certainly understand the gravity of those words. I'm sure you remember Columbine and the student who wouldn't deny Jesus as her Lord and Savior. She actually died for Jesus. I often wonder if I would have had that kind of courage. I hope I would. Recently, a friend of mine told me the story of her 13-year-old son who said, "Mom, I'd take a bullet for a kid who didn't know Jesus." Imagine that kind of love and concern for other souls at that tender age. And yet, how afraid are we sometimes to witness to a stranger or tell someone lost about the love of Christ? To live our faith means to be consistent in our love for others, whether it's in the workplace when a coworker gets angry at us, or in traffic when the guy cuts us off for no reason, or when a spouse forgets a birthday or anniversary. Being faithful in all seasons and at all times, loving the unlovely, confessing Jesus before men at all cost, that's our calling. And that, dear friends, is our note of hope for today. Thanks so much for joining us, and God bless you.